So that's my introduction to at least the radical Islam and what it means in the Middle East and what's at stake for people. And in a region of the world, I'll end with this, in a region of the world, the Arab world, which is declining rapidly by any measure, economically, intellectually, that has discredited governments, that have governments that are all going to fail within the next few years. I mean, President Mubarak is, what, 82 or something like that. Bashar al-Assad in Syria is not very strong. Jordan may survive, but Jordan has no real economy unless we figure out how to make energy out of sand. Lebanon has not had a functioning government since March. So these are all, Iraq, I don't know if they have a functioning government, you know, it's hard to tell. So all these areas are very, very vulnerable. And these are groups of very fanatical, they're small. I mean, understand that they represent a minority, but a minority with an answer, with following, willing to use force, feel that God's behind them. And that's what at least the Arab world is facing. So I'm going to stop there, and I guess we have questions, or should I do that? Do you want to call people? I get to do it. Okay.
Repeat the question. Just please repeat that question.
Okay, and I'll repeat the question. Let me start here, and I'll go this way.
Is there a potential for the U.S. to negotiate credibly, legitimately with Taliban?
All right, the question is there a way for the U.S. to negotiate credibly with the Taliban? The answer is yes and no, and it depends what we want from them. If we're willing to say, look, you can have Afghanistan, and we'll leave you alone, and you leave us alone, yes, we probably can. Right? Because they care about Afghanistan. If we want to say, well, you know, you can have Afghanistan, but we don't want you to do this, we don't want you to do that, it's not going to work. So if we give them space and room to do their thing without our interfering, we probably could. Do we want to do that? I don't know. But I think, beyond that, I don't think there is. The Taliban, not so much. Al-Qaeda, yes. But the Taliban, not so much. They're really Afghani, they're Pashtun, that's where they care about. Now, they gave a little bit of shelter to Al-Qaeda, but Al-Qaeda is more of a threat than the Taliban. So you agree.
Can you talk about funding for these organizations? I mean, you're talking about an Arab world where we just have not economic time and people, you know, desperately poor, and yet the operations of all these terrorists require a significant amount of dollars, and even running hospitals require a significant amount of dollars. Where does that, I mean, there's not enough parts to pay for that.
First of all, a lot of what they're doing is not that expensive, but they're getting money from Saudi Arabia. They're getting money.
Repeat the question.
Oh, how they're getting the funding was the question, basically. All right, well, in the case of Saudi Arabia, Saudi Arabia has essentially buying them off, is what they're doing. The Saudi royal family has billions, and they're buying off the Wahhabis, including Al-Qaeda. Yeah, just do it somewhere else. You know, don't kill them in Pakistan. Just leave us alone. The Hezbollah, of course, is getting funding from Iran for totally different reasons. So that, I mean, that's where a lot of it's coming from. And they get donations, you know, from the Arab world. I mean, they're followers here and there. A lot of when you talk about the tribal areas of Pakistan or Afghanistan, you know, you're not talking about very sophisticated people. Even Egypt, you know, there's Egypt. I mean, a striking statistic is Egypt in 1800, when Napoleon was there, had 2 million people. Right? 200 years later, do you know what the Egyptian population is? Huh? 50, 60 million? They stopped counting around 80. Right? Now this is in 80 million. So there's not schools, there's not hospitals, there's nothing. So people kind of get involved in these youth groups and these clinics, and they're getting money that way as well. So yeah.
Now, I know you're talking about the Arab world as how they're fractionalized, but it seems like the European world is running scared. They don't know who they're running scared from.
Oh yeah, no, in Europe this is a tremendous problem. Different European countries are facing different problems. This is all not homogeneous. In France, it's mostly Moroccans and Algerians, and that's one whole set of problems. In Germany, it's mostly Turks. It's another problem. England, there's a lot of Pakistanis. It's a third problem. So these are not, and these groups don't all get along with each other. You should know, by the way, Pakistan's Islamic tradition is Sufi. So when Al-Qaeda is in Pakistan, it's not just Al-Qaeda in Pakistan, it's not Pashtuns and other tribes. It's also Sunnis against Sufis. I mean, beyond everything, beyond religion, secular, and all that.
The women under the Taliban were really abused.
Oh yeah.
But I don't get that feeling about these other movements. Is it true for the other movements?
It's somewhat true of Al-Qaeda, but Al-Qaeda's never been in power.
Please repeat.
So,
Try to repeat
I'm
yourself.
sorry.
Is that okay?
So the role of women seem to have been really abused under the Taliban. Is that true of these other movements? And my answer was, it's not. We don't know about Al-Qaeda because they've never been in control of anything, right? Hamas, sort of. You know, they're not as bad as the Taliban with the whole Hadur and all, but there's also a kind of right movement in the Arab world and religious worlds in general. So more and more women are wearing hijab and so forth. So the abuse of women that we've seen by the Taliban is not as true of Hamas and Islamic Brotherhood. But there's clearly a movement to the right in all. Sorry, in any case, yeah. There's so many hands. Yeah.
You speak of radical Islam and their power. Is this such a thing as moderate Islam?
Well, there's.
Question?
All right. The question is there a moderate Islam? And the answer is, first of all, there are a lot of moderate Muslims. The radical, the Salafi is a minority within what we call fundamentalist Islam, which aren't all radical. So you've got a minority of a minority. And when you get groups like Taliban and so forth, they're really minorities of the minority of the minority. So most Muslims are moderate Muslims. There's no, like, moderate Muslim incorporated, right? There's no movement of moderates. You know how moderates are. There is in the United States, it's called Progressive Islam, and it's starting to kind of work here a little bit. And they keep saying, you know, if we can organize a sort of modernist Islam in America, maybe we can influence the East. But it's really in its first generation. Yeah.
But doctrinally, how do they justify, these radical groups, justify the violence, in a sense, the random violence directed against other Muslims in the marketplace, for example, and correspondingly, you know, some of the funding comes from, example, Afghanistan raising, you know, plants that can be used for drugs, poppies, yes. So how do they justify that when those would be prohibited, you know, within their own community?
Okay, so the question is the justification radical Muslims use to kill other Muslims, essentially, like the marketplace bombing, that was today in Peshawar, right? They justify it on a couple of grounds, and there are different ways of doing it. One is you could just be very sort of Wahhabi about it and say, well, all these people in the market are buying Western goods, they're all apostates and heretics, and they deserve to be blown up anyway. You could be a little bit more sophisticated and take a page out of Maoism and say, if we create enough chaos in the society, the government will collapse, and then we can take over.